All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been doing a series of videos for one of the textbooks we're using for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1000 Web Development Technologies class. The book is Murox HTML and CSS 4th edition, and I'm up to Chapter 4, Part 2 of Chapter 4, in fact. So, as I continue on, they talk here about colors. And there's different ways that you can specify colors. There are a limited number, I don't know what the number is, of actual color names you can use. You can use RGB, where it's 3 numbers, and the first number is the amount of red you want, the second number is the amount of green you want, the third number is the amount of blue you want. And notice when you do this, you can either use percentages or actual numbers between 0 and 255. All right? You can also specify what's called a hexadecimal value for colors. A complete saturation of color, FFF, would be like 255, 255, 255. That's white. A complete absence of color, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, would be like RGB 0, 0, 0, or 0%, 0%, 0%. Red, which is $FF0000, means a total saturation of red, no green, no blue. And there are even other ways. There's what's called HSL for hue, saturation, and light, and you can also bring in transparency into this. We'll get into that stuff later. All right? But you'll notice, if I come back, I'm going to just quickly show you every one of these here. All right? So I'm going to go back to what we have just been working on here. And rather than setting the stuff here, I'll set it. Yeah, we can. Let's see. Yeah, we'll do it like that. That's fine. Let's say that our H1, all right, we want that to be green. All right, so our H1, we don't want our H1 to be green. We want the color of the text in our H1 to be green. So we tell it for an H1, the color is green. All right, so there we were. Pretty obvious what just happened. All right, now we went in here, if you remember, and we said our border should have been solid and it should have been black. Let's make that red. But instead of using that, let's put in RGB 255 for a total saturation of red, 0 for no green, 0 for no blue. Let's see if it makes our border change. And now we have a red border. We could have also done that one with 100%, 0%, I don't even know if we need to say a percent sign because it's 0, and 0%. Just to be sure, let's change that. Let's make this 0%, and we'll make it blue. So again, you'll see total absence of red, total absence of green, total saturation of blue. When I refresh, this border should turn blue, and it does. All right, we can also use, again, so let's go back here, and instead of making this green, let's make it, I don't know, we'll make it black, all right, for the H1. But we'll use $0000000, which is a total absence of any red, any green, and any blue. So if I did this right, this, where it says San Joaquin Valley Town Hall, when I refresh here, should turn black. And it does. All right, so these videos may end up taking a little bit longer because when something is mentioned, I at least want to try to get you somewhat familiar with it. All right? So there's some of their examples. Are theirs better than mine? They're just other examples. Now, remember when you're working with colors, approximately 10% of the population of the world is colorblind. I know I've got an older brother who's colorblind. All right? And there's different degrees of colorblind. That's why typically you'll want dark text on a light background. Some people believe you should have light text on a dark background, but there should be contrast. The easiest to read is what they show here. Black type on a white background. It's also the most blah looking. All right. So again, they talk about other ways that you can add colors. This thing right here is known as opacity. All right. And this is hue, saturation, and light. It's another way of doing it. I think we get into this in a later chapter. But what I want to do is I want to come back and change my RGB to an RGBA, just so you can see that in action, so to speak. All right, do I have an RGB in here? There it is. I'm going to change this to RGBA, and I'll make it, to start with, 25%. If you say, what does that do? Let's look. See what it did to our border? It made it 75% transparent. All right? That's the alpha. If we change that from 25 to 75, and we bring it up again, now it almost looks the same. It's 3/4 as opposed to 1/4. And you can apply this alpha or this opacity to anything. You can apply it, as I just showed you, to borders, to H1 tags, to paragraphs, whatever you want to or need to do. Sometimes people do this stuff, again, for effect on pages. They give you some examples there and how it will look in the browser. All right, I've already shown you, excuse me, that kind of morning. I've already shown you the differences between IDs and classes. Right? Classes you can apply to more than one element, as they've done right here. IDs are designed to be only applied to one element per page. Plus, you can put both an ID and a class on the same element. Now, when you're doing a style sheet, I like to work from the top on down. This right here, this asterisk, is what's referred to as a universal selector. And what that means is I want to apply to the entire document a margin, half an M, which is 8 pixels, and 1 M, which is 16 pixels. Since there's only two values here, this one will be applied to the top and bottom. This one will be applied to the right and left. If that doesn't make sense, we're going to be going over that later. So they're showing you examples. If you put something like that in here, this is what it'll look like. Now, I should mention to you that what you will be provided for this class are all of the book exercises. I'd say take them apart, shred them, make changes to them, see what happens. The best way to learn this stuff is to practice with this stuff. So there's putting a class of speakers. All right. What else do they have here? It doesn't look like that much. Okay. Here's where it starts to get a little bit confusing. All right. This, for example, is called the descendant selector. This is any LI that exists in main. This is any A tag that exists in an unordered list. These are adjacent siblings, so they're at the same level. These are child siblings. So these are paragraphs that are direct children of main, anchor tags that are direct children of an LI. All right, then there's general siblings. We're going to get into all this stuff later. Okay, and you can use combinations as well. You can do some pretty heavy stuff with this. And if it sounds right now as though, well, yeah, you're kind of going over it quickly, yeah, because I don't want to overwhelm anybody. All right. There's also some pseudo classes. These right here are what you apply to. These are what you apply to links. In fact, let's grab this just so you see it. Come on. And I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to our Muroc.css file. It's right here. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do is, other than the body here, I'm going to remove everything else that we put in here. Everything. and hit enter a few times, and then put this back. All right, so this is a link, and I'm going to put in here, just so you see this, color green. All right, and I'm just going to do these one at a time, so let me comment this out. So all of our A tags should now be green. Is that going to work? We're going to find out. We don't have any A tags, so let's put one in. We'll put a P tag in here. And we'll say, we love San Joaquin, California. All right. And I'm going to take the San Joaquin and I'm going to just take that and put it in an anchor tag. All right. Is this that big a thing? I think it is. That's why I'm taking the time to show it to you. Notice that the tag is green. By default, they're usually what? They're usually blue. So then we've got visited. So let's do that one. And this one will say color pink. Oops. And we will again comment the other three out. Now when you first look at this, you're going to say, doesn't look any different. But notice what happens when I click it. It says the file wasn't found. I'll tell you what I'll do is, I don't know, we may need an active link in here. So let me actually just put in where I work. So we'll put in here https://rankin.edu. All right, so okay, that brought Rankin up. We come back here, and you'll notice now it's pink. All right, I'm just going to keep rolling with the punches here and try to show you quickly all of these. All right, next we've got active. All right, so an active link, let's make that color orange. All right, and we come back here. It's not going to look any different until we go and click on it. I'm clicking and holding down on the mouse. All right, that's when we get active. We've got hover. And we'll make the color on that. I don't know. Orange, white, yellow. All right. Now notice what happens when I take my mouse and hover over the link. See how it turns yellow? The last one is focus, and I believe, I could be wrong here, I don't use that one very often, at least I don't think I do. If you ever see this come up like this, this is the last document that I created, and it's what happens when I'm done producing it. It's no big thing. So, for focus, I think that's when you, we'll find out. Boy, I need a color. Wow, pink, orange, green. What have I used here? What haven't I used? I used orange. Try red. All right. And I wish I remembered what focus was. All right, we'll hit it in a later chapter. You've seen the rest of them, though, and I believe they have to be put in this order. Link, visited, active, hover. So you saw some examples of them, okay? All right, probably should have a cheat sheet with me, but I'm doing this off the top of my head. Some pseudo classes. First child, so if I've got an unordered list with 10 items, first child would give me the 0th element, last would give me the 9th. All right. Could have something that worked on just a child. First letter and first line, you may have seen this already. What some sites do is they take the first line of text and they put it in uppercase. Maybe you've seen a children's story when they say once upon a time and the O is real big. You could use that. Okay? All right, so they give you an example of using some of these. I probably should have just looked at theirs. You notice the links. Okay? And there's the first child. So the first paragraph in main should be bolded. The first letter in there should be 150%. There's that 150%. There's the first paragraph being bolded. All right. Accessibility guidelines, again, says apply the same formatting to the hover and focus pseudo classes for an element. So if you've got somebody who can't use a mouse, and there are people who are not very dexterous, all right, and they struggle to do a lot of things that you and I may not struggle with, all right? What you'll see, hopefully, when we start to create our site is be consistent. All right. Now notice these. When you put important in here, exclamation point important, that'll override things. All right. Okay. That's how you can show something is important. So that says that anytime we've applied the class, that's the period, called highlight, bold whatever it is, and make it important. So even if it wasn't supposed to bold it, override it if possible, and do that. If more than one style rule is applied to an element, as it says, use the one with the highest specificity first. An ID is the most specific. It's more specific than a class. And an element or a pseudo element, like when we did the H1, or the pseudo element when we looked at the hover, etc., they're the least specific. Now, if you want to start seeing how you're applying this stuff, I'm going to go back to my web page here. And you've got some function keys on the top of your keyboard. F1 through F12 keys. I'm going to hit the F12. And then I'm going to click Elements. And it shows me everything. Notice if I take my mouse and I put it, for example, on my header, you can see how the header gets highlighted when we do that. All right? Then I can come in here and I can see all of the stuff that's been applied to this. And you might say, you didn't apply all that stuff. No, some of these are the defaults of the browser. Again, any defaults are what you turn off when you use that reset file or that normalize file. All right? Okay, this is going to have to be 3 parts, but I want to get just a little bit further. So to use the Chrome Developer Tools, you press the F12 key. We're going to have not a whole chapter, but at least part of a chapter later where we're going to do this. All right, font families. Serif, sans serif, monospace, cursive, fantasy. Here's examples of each one. So, serif, sans serif. Serif, sans serif. Monospace, which kind of looks monotonous. Cursive, some people like that, some people find it hard to read. And fantasy. Okay? Rarely used because it's kind of chunk stuff together. When you work with fonts, you do them in families. So what this says is, if I have applied this first family, try to find and use an Arial font. If for some reason that isn't available, use a Helvetica font. If for some reason that's not available, use the sans serif font. You'll notice how the Times New Roman and the Courier New are in double quotes because they have spaces in there. You should always have the last one you put in, or typically you do, be either a sans serif or a serif font. Why? Because those should be available on virtually any kind of a machine. Font size, this says you can use points or percentages or M's. Again, really, really shy away from using points. Use percentages and M's, as I mentioned before, because they scale. All right. right, you can set font families for the entire document, for just elements on a document, or anything you want to do. Font weight is typically how you do bold. Font style is how you do things like italicize. All right. So there's, styles and variants. Variant, if you wanted everything in small size but capital letters. Fonts, we're going to look at these. You can use numbers from 100 to 900 or bold. I think there's a bold, bolder, and boldest. All right. And line height, which is the amount of space you have between lines. You can either take these properties and set them individually or combine them into what's called a shorthand or shortcut font property. You can take your text and indent it left, right, or center, align it left, right, or center, align it vertically, and this text decoration will become important later when we build our site, because what that does is it turns off, typically it's used to turn off underlining for hyperlinks. All right, so here will be one where they use some alignment, and you can see how it's indented. Don't see a lot of that typically on websites. You may. I guess it just depends. You can work with shadows. See that? Oftentimes, if you use a shadow like this, you might have the background color be a different color. Might even be black so that it sticks out more. You can also work with blur. We'll get into all this stuff later. All right. Notice how they used a lighter color behind it. Kind of makes it stand out a little bit more. I think I'm just going to finish this up. Again, as always, remember the visually impaired. Too much shadow or too much blur may make something impossible for them to read. All right. Probably the hardest thing for us to understand in this part of the class is what's called float. Here we floated our image to the left. By doing that, it took this text that went with it and brought it on the same line. When you don't float like this, otherwise, since, oftentimes what will happen is these two lines of text will go below this. All right. So you can float left, you can float right, and when you get done floating, you have to turn the floating off. And you typically do that by saying clear left, clear right, or clear both. I'm not expecting that that's going to make a whole boatload of sense. We will cover that in depth and breadth of coverage later on in the course. All right, so again, that's the way you can stop floating. All right, so they end this up with a web page that uses the styles that were introduced here in the chapter. All right, so they put a lot of stuff in here. What I like about this author, what I like about these books, is they try to annotate using stuff like color what it is they're trying to do here. So they use normalize first, then main. They use classes. There might be an ID sprinkled in here. I don't know. Then they show you the CSS. Please take advantage of what the book gives you. Take a look at what's in there. Don't be afraid. Copy it, change it around, etc. So that's it for Chapter 4. When I come back in just a matter of moments, we're going into Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is how to use the CSS box model. So I'll see you shortly.